Abigail Carter's fingers closed around a stranger's wrist like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. "Dance with me," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please, pretend you know me." Behind her, Charles Whitmore was already crossing the floor, the man who'd sworn she'd be his wife by morning, whether she agreed or not. She had no idea the stranger she'd seized was Nathaniel Reed, heir to half of Virginia. If you believe a person's worth is measured by their heart and not their name, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1817 hung heavy over the Whitmore estate, and the ballroom smelled of beeswax candles and money. Abigail Carter stood with her back against a marble column, a tray of empty glasses forgotten in her hands, and tried to make herself small. She had served at 100 gatherings like this one. She knew her place in them. The widow Eleanor Bennett had brought her tonight as a companion, not a servant, but the difference was thin as paper, and everyone in that room knew which side of it Abigail belonged on. What she had not expected was Charles Whitmore. He came at her sideways the way a man approaches a horse he means to break. He was a banker 42 years old with silver at his temples and a smile that never once reached his eyes. He owned the only bank in the county. He owned half the mortgages too, and most of the men who held the other half owed him favors. "Miss Carter." He stopped close. Too close. "You look pale. Have you eaten?" "I'm well, sir." "You're trembling." He took the tray from her hands without asking and set it on the column's ledge. "Let me speak plainly, since plain speech is something you and I both value. I've spoken with the magistrate. I've spoken with your guardian's lawyer. The papers are drawn." "What papers?" "Marriage papers." He said it the way another man might say good evening. "By noon tomorrow, you'll sign them. You'll be Mrs. Whitmore by the week's end." The room kept turning around them. Fiddles sawed. Skirts hissed across the floor. Abigail heard none of it. "I never agreed to that. You don't have to agree to it." His voice dropped smooth and almost gentle, which was worse than cruelty. "Mrs. Bennett owes my bank more than her estate is worth. Did she tell you that? No. She wouldn't. The kind old fool." He let that sit. "I can call the debt tomorrow and put her out on the road at 68 years of age. Or I can forgive every cent of it as a wedding gift. The choice, Miss Carter, is yours. But it's the only choice you'll be given. You'd ruin an old woman to force a girl into your bed." "I'd acquire what I've decided to acquire." He straightened his cuffs. "You included. Now, smile. People are looking." People were looking. That was the thing about a room like this, 100 eyes, and not one of them on her side. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife," Charles murmured, already stepping back into the crowd. "Whether you agree or not." He bowed to someone behind her and was gone. Abigail did not remember deciding to move. She only knew that her body had begun walking fast into the thick of the dancers, that her breath had gone ragged, that the candles had blurred into long smears of gold. She could not breathe. She could not stay. And she could not run from a ballroom in front of 300 people without becoming the scandal Charles would use to break the widow's spirit. So she did the only thing left to a cornered creature. She reached out and grabbed the nearest hand. It belonged to a tall man in a dark coat standing alone at the edge of the dancers with a glass of untouched wine. She did not look at his face. She looked at his hand, and she held it like it was the last solid thing in a falling world. "Dance with me," she said. The man went still. "Please." Her voice cracked clean down the middle. "Pretend you know me. Pretend we came together. Just don't let go. Not yet." For one terrible moment he said nothing. Then his fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and he stepped forward into the dance as though they'd planned it a week ago. "Easy now, ma'am," he said low just for her. "I've got you. Follow my lead and breathe. There. Like that." She followed. Her feet remembered the steps her mind had forgotten. He turned her gently through the crowd, his hand at her waist, light as a held breath, and slowly, slowly, the room stopped spinning. "You're shaking like a leaf in October," he said. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I don't even know who you are." Nathaniel, he said, and before you ask no, I won't let go till you tell me to. A man doesn't abandon a lady in the middle of a waltz. Wouldn't be decent. She risked looking up at him then. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair and a steadiness in his eyes that she hadn't seen in any man at that party. He wasn't handsome the way Charles was handsome, polished, arranged. He looked like a man who'd worked outdoors and laughed easily and didn't much care what the room thought of him. Now, he said, turning her again, you're going to tell me who put that look on your face, or I'm going to start guessing, and I guess badly. It's nothing, a misunderstanding. Ma'am, I've seen misunderstandings. They don't make a woman grab a stranger and beg. His jaw tightened. Someone threatened you. She said nothing. That was answer enough. The fellow by the column, Nathaniel said quietly. Silver hair. Watching you like a hawk watches a field mouse. That the one? Her step faltered. He caught her smoothly. Don't look, he said. Just keep dancing. There's a girl. So that's Whitmore. You know him. Everyone knows Charles Whitmore. He holds paper on half the county. His voice had changed, still gentle with her, but underneath it, something had gone hard and cold. What's he threatening you with? Please, you've been kind. You don't have to, miss. He said it firmly enough to stop her. I asked you a question, and I'd take it as a courtesy if you'd answer it. What did he threaten? The music swelled. Couples spun past them laughing oblivious. He says I'll marry him by week's end, she whispered. Or he'll call in Mrs. Bennett's debts and put her on the road. She's all but raised me. She's the only family I've got left. I can't let him do that to her. I can't. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. So, you'll sell yourself to save the old woman, he said. Don't make it sound... I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm saying it plain. He looked down at her. What's your name? Abigail. Abigail Carter. Carter. Something flickered across his face, gone too quick to read. Your father wouldn't have been... Thomas Carter, would he? Farmed out past the Hollow Creek line. Her heart stopped. How do you know my father's name? Reckon that's a story for another time. The dance was slowing. The fiddles drew out their last notes. Abigail Carter. I'm going to ask you to trust me about 30 seconds longer than is sensible. Can you do that? I don't even know your last name. No, he agreed. You don't. The music ended. Applause scattered across the room, and Charles Whitmore was already coming toward them. He moved through the dancers with the easy authority of a man who'd never once been told no. He fixed his eyes on Abigail, and his smile spread, and Abigail felt her whole body go cold. Miss Carter, Charles said, arriving. I'd wondered where you'd wandered off to. It's unseemly for my bride to be dancing with... His gaze cut to Nathaniel, dismissive. Forgive me, sir. I don't believe we've... And then he saw the man's face. Whatever Charles Whitmore had been about to say died in his throat. The color went out of his cheeks the way water goes out of a cracked cup. He actually took half a step back. Mr. Reed, he said. Whitmore. Nathaniel's voice was pleasant. Pleasant the way a still pond is pleasant with you not knowing how deep it runs. Lovely party. Your wine's a touch young, but I expect that's the times. I wasn't aware you'd be attending. No, I don't expect you were. Nathaniel kept Abigail's hand tucked in the crook of his arm, easy as anything, and Abigail felt the whole shape of the room shift around that small gesture. I came on account of a friend. Didn't realize I'd find Miss Carter here. We're old acquaintances, she and I. Acquaintances. Charles's eyes flicked between them, and his smile, when it returned, was thinner than before. Miss Carter and I have an understanding, Mr. Reed, a formal one. The papers are with the magistrate. That's so. By noon tomorrow she'll do whatever she pleases, Nathaniel said, and the pleasantness was gone now, just like that, like a man setting down a cup. That's how it tends to work with a free woman in a free country. Or am I mistaken about the country we're standing in, Whitmore? The two men looked at each other. Abigail had grown up watching weather come over the mountains, the way the air goes heavy and the birds go quiet before a storm breaks. She felt that same heaviness now standing between them, her hand resting on the arm of a man whose name had just emptied the blood from a banker's face. "I think," Charles said slowly, "that you should be careful, Mr. Reed, about inserting yourself into other men's affairs. And I think," Nathaniel answered, "that a man who threatens to put a 68-year-old widow on the road to bully a girl into his bed oughtn't lecture anyone about affairs." He tilted his head. "But I'm only guessing at the particulars. Why don't you correct me in front of all these fine people? Tell them what understanding you've got with Miss Carter, loud now, so the back of the room can hear." Charles said nothing. "No." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I didn't reckon so." "This isn't finished," Charles said quietly. "No, sir." Nathaniel agreed. "I don't expect it is." Charles turned to Abigail, and for the space of a breath, the mask slipped, and she saw the cold fury underneath it. "We'll speak tomorrow, Miss Carter," he said. "Alone." Then he bowed stiff as a fence post and walked away. Abigail realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out, and her knees nearly went with it. "There now." Nathaniel's hand came under her elbow, steadying her without a fuss. "Don't faint on me. You've come this far standing up. Be ashamed to quit now." "I don't understand," she whispered. "What just happened? Why was he afraid of you? He's not afraid of anyone. He's afraid of one or two things." Nathaniel guided her toward the open doors and the cooler air beyond, and she went because her legs had stopped consulting her about where to go. "Mostly he's afraid of folks who don't owe him money. There aren't many of us left in this county." They reached the wide doorway. Beyond it lay the long drive the carriages the night. "Who are you?" Abigail asked. He stopped. He looked at her for a long moment, and there was something almost apologetic in his face, as though he knew the answer was going to cost her something. "My name's Nathaniel Reed," he said. "Reed." Abigail's hand went to her mouth. Everyone in the county knew the name Reed. The Reeds owned the great valley to the north, the timber and the river crossing, and the land that stretched farther than a man could ride in a day. The Reeds had built the church and half the town. Old Augustus Reed was the closest thing Virginia had to a king without a crown. And she had grabbed his son's hand, begged him, wept on his sleeve and called him a stranger. "Oh no." She stepped back. "Oh no, forgive me, sir, I would never have I thought you were a nobody." He almost smiled. "Some fellow standing alone at a party with a bad glass of wine I was. For a few minutes there, that's exactly who I was, and I'll tell you, ma'am, I haven't enjoyed a party that much in years. You must think I think you're a woman who'd marry a man she hates to keep a roof over an old lady's head." His voice was quiet and plain, and there was no mockery in it anywhere. "I've met a lot of people in fine clothes tonight, Miss Carter. You're the first one I've liked." She didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure anyone had ever said such a thing to her in her life. "I have to go," she managed. "Mrs. Bennet, she'll be looking for me. And tomorrow, oh God, tomorrow Tomorrow," Nathaniel said, "you'll do nothing. You'll sign no papers. If Whitmore comes calling you, tell him Nathaniel Reed sends his regards and means to take a personal interest in Mrs. Bennet's accounts." He said it lightly, but underneath the lightness there was iron. He won't move against her now. Not for a while. He'll want to know what I know first. That'll buy you time. "Why?" The word came out of her cracked and disbelieving. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. You met me 20 minutes ago. I lied to you. I used you. Why would a man like you trouble himself over a girl like me?" Nathaniel Reed looked out at the dark drive and the carriage lamps and the wide summer night, and for a moment he didn't answer at all. "Because I knew your father," he said finally. "And because what was done to Thomas Carter was a wrong that's gone unanswered too long." He turned back to her, and his eyes had that storm-coming heaviness again. "You said your father lost the farm because he fell on hard times. That's what you were told." "That's what happened." No, ma'am, Nathaniel said softly. That's not what happened at all, and I reckon it's high time somebody told you the truth of it. A footman called from inside. Eleanor Bennett's voice, thin and worried, drifted across the floor, calling Abigail's name. Go on, Nathaniel said. Your old lady needs you. We'll talk when the world's not watching. Abigail took 2 steps toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back at him. This stranger who wasn't a stranger, this lord of the valley who'd held her shaking hand and faced down the most powerful man in the county without raising his voice. Mr. Reed, she said, thank you, whatever this is, whatever you think you know, thank you for not letting go. Nathaniel Reed touched the brim of an imaginary hat, the old country gesture, the one a working man makes to a lady. Wouldn't have been decent, ma'am, he said, and Abigail Carter walked back into the bright and watchful room, her heart beating hard against her ribs, carrying with her the impossible weight of a kindness she did not understand, and a truth she did not yet know, that the ground beneath her whole life had been a lie, and the man who'd just promised to tell her the truth was the one man in Virginia powerful enough to make Charles Whitmore afraid. Orchestrated rising action narrative, voy twist lawn, va mini climax lean tuck. Orchestrated rising action narrative, voy twist lawn, va mini climax lean tuck. The truth. Nathaniel had promised did not come the next day, nor the day after that. It came on the 3rd morning when Abigail had nearly convinced herself she'd dreamed the whole thing. The dance, the banker's drained face, the lord of the valley touching an imaginary hat. She was hanging wash in the side yard of Eleanor Bennett's house when she heard hoofbeats slow at the gate. Don't drop the sheet, ma'am, came a familiar voice. I'd hate to be the cause of more laundry. Abigail turned a clothespin still in her mouth, and there was Nathaniel Reed sitting in easy seat on a tall gray horse, dressed like any farmer come to call, no fine coat, no airs. She took the pin out of her mouth. You can't be here. I'm here, though. If anyone sees you, if Charles hears, let him hear. He swung down off the horse. I told you he'd hold his hand a while. He has. You sign anything yet? No. He come around. He sent a letter. Her jaw tightened. Polite as church. Said he was willing to be patient with a grieving girl's nerves. Said the offer stood till the end of the month. End of the month. Nathaniel nodded slowly. He's giving himself time to find out what game I'm playing. That's good. Time's the only thing keeping that old woman in her house right now. You keep saying that. Abigail set down the basket. You keep talking about my father, about Charles, about debts and games, and you never once say the thing out loud. So say it. You came all this way. Say it to my face. For a moment, he just looked at her, and she watched him weigh whether she was ready. She lifted her chin so he'd know she was. Your father didn't lose that farm to bad weather and bad luck, Nathaniel said. Charles Whitmore took it from him. On purpose. With forged paper. The clothesline creaked in the wind. Abigail did not move. That's a lie, she said. I wish it were. My father told me himself, before he died. He said the crops failed 2 years running, and the bank had to call the note, and there wasn't a thing anyone could have. Your father told you what a proud man tells his daughter so she won't grow up hating the world. Nathaniel's voice stayed gentle, but it didn't bend. Thomas Carter borrowed $200 against 80 acres. He paid it back. Every cent on time, I'd swear to it. But when he came to redeem the note, Whitmore showed him a second note. One Thomas had never signed. Said he'd borrowed 1,100 more. Said the farm was forfeit. That's not possible. My father couldn't read more than his own name. He'd never have signed. That's exactly why Whitmore chose him. The words landed flat and hard. A man who can't read can't argue what's written. Can't prove the signature's wrong when he can barely make his own. Whitmore's done it to a dozen families in this county, Abigail. Maybe 24. Men who farmed land their grandfathers cleared and woke up one morning owing money they never saw to a bank they couldn't fight. Abigail's hands had begun to shake. She pressed them flat against her apron to stop them. How do you know this? She whispered. Because one of those families came to my father for help 4 years back. Augustus Reed sent them away. Said it wasn't Reed business. Something dark moved behind his eyes. I've been quietly buying up the wronged folks' stories ever since. Listening. Writing it down. Waiting on the day I'd have enough to break him. He stepped closer. And then a girl grabbed my hand at a party and begged me to dance. And I asked her name. And it was Carter. The wind took a corner of the hanging sheet and snapped it like a sail. You think God put you in front of me? Abigail said. I don't reckon God's that tidy. A faint, tired smile. But I'll take the help where it lands. She turned away from him. She stared at the rows of clean wash white against the green, and she thought about her father's hands, how they'd gone still and folded on the coverlet at the end. How he'd looked at her and said, Don't you carry this? Abby weren't nobody's fault, and she understood now with a grief so sharp it stole her breath that he had spent his last strength protecting the man who robbed him from the daughter who might have hated him. He knew, she said. My father knew the truth, and he died with it. To spare me. Sounds like he was a better man than most. He was a poor man. She spun back and there were tears standing in her eyes, but her voice came out fierce. He was a poor man who couldn't read, and that made him easy. That made him nothing to men like Whitmore. Men like... She stopped herself. Go on, Nathaniel said quietly. Men like me. Say it. I didn't mean... You did, and you're half right too. He didn't flinch from it. My family's got more land than 10 families could farm, and we got some of it the same way. Whitmore gets his cheap off folks who couldn't hold on. I'm not clean in this, Abigail. I'm just done pretending I don't see it. She wiped her eyes hard with the back of her wrist. Why tell me at all? You could have kept your secrets and used them when you pleased. Why hand me a grief I was living fine without? Because you've got a right to it. He said it simply. It's your father, your name. And because I'll wager there's a paper somewhere in this house that proves part of it, and you're the only one who'd know where Thomas Carter would have hidden a thing he didn't want found. That stopped her cold. What paper? The original note. The real one, $200 paid in full. If your father kept the receipt, kept anything in his own hand, it'd put a crack in Whitmore's whole story. His eyes held hers. A man like that builds his fortune on the certainty that the dead can't testify and the poor can't read. You prove one false paper, and every family he's robbed comes forward. The crack becomes a flood. Abigail's mind was already moving, racing back through years, through the few small things her father had owned that she'd kept after he passed. A Bible, a whetstone, a tin box she'd never opened because opening it had felt like burying him twice. There's a box, she said slowly. I couldn't bring myself to look inside it. Nathaniel went very still. Where is it? But before she could answer, the back door opened and Eleanor Bennett came out onto the step. 68 years old, straight-backed as a fence rail, with eyes that had missed nothing in 40 years of running a household. Abigail, the old woman said, why is Augustus Reed's son standing in my wash yard dressed like a hired hand? Nathaniel took off the hat he wasn't wearing, caught himself, and bowed instead. Mrs. Bennett, ma'am. Don't ma'am me, young man, I knew your grandmother. Eleanor came down the step with the deliberate care of the old, and she fixed Nathaniel with a look that would have curdled milk. I'll ask you plain, since plain's the only kind of talk I've patience for at my age. Are you here to help this girl or to ruin her because a Reed paying calls on a banker's intended bride is a story that'll be all over this county by supper, and it's not my reputation that'll burn for it? He came to warn us, Abigail said quickly. About Charles, about what he's done. I know what Charles Whitmore's done. The words dropped like a stone in a well. Both of them turned to her. You... Abigail's voice failed. You know, Eleanor Bennett looked suddenly older than her years, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with the mourning. Child, why do you think I'm in debt to that man? Do you imagine I've been gambling? Drinking? A thin, bitter laugh. I co-signed a note, years ago. For a tenant family, I was fond of the Holloways when Charles came after their land. I thought my name would shield them. I was a foolish old woman who believed a banker would respect a widow's word. Her hands tightened on her cane. He took the Holloway's farm anyway. And then he came for me, said the co-signed debt was mine to carry with interest he'd invented out of thin air. I've been paying it down for 6 years. I'll be paying it the day they bury me. You never told me, Abigail whispered. What was there to tell? That I'm caught the same as everyone. That the only thing keeping you and me under this roof is that the debt isn't quite called yet. Eleanor's eyes glistened, but she did not let them spill. When he came for you, Abigail, when he decided he wanted you, I knew exactly what kind of bargain he meant. Marry him, and he forgives my debt. Refuse him, and he puts us both on the road. I have been trying to find a way to spare you that choice. I haven't found one. She looked at Nathaniel. And then you arrive. So tell me, Mr. Reed, have you found one? Nathaniel Reed looked at the two women, the old one who'd ruined herself trying to protect a tenant, and the young one who'd nearly sold herself to protect the old one, and something in his face settled. The way a man's face settles when he stops calculating and simply decides. Mrs. Bennet, he said, if there's a single honest paper in this house that proves what Whitmore did to Thomas Carter, then yes, ma'am, I believe I found one. The old woman studied him a long moment. Then she turned to Abigail. The tin box, she said. Abigail's breath caught. You knew about the box. Your father gave it to me the week before he died. Made me swear to keep it till you were grown and steady enough to bear what's in it. Eleanor's voice trembled just once and steadied. He said, Eleanor, there's a wrong in here, and a day may come when my girl's strong enough to right it. Don't let her open it before then. The old woman's chin lifted. I have judged these past 3 years that the day had not come. I begin to think I judged wrong. She turned and went back up the steps slow and disappeared into the house. Abigail and Nathaniel stood in the wash yard and did not speak. My father gave it to her, Abigail finally said. He didn't trust himself to keep it. He knew Whitmore might come looking even after he was gone. He was protecting you to the last. Nathaniel's voice was low, right up to handing the truth to the one person Whitmore wouldn't think to search. Eleanor returned. In her 2 thin hands, she carried a tin box, dented at one corner, the lid held shut with a leather thong gone stiff with age. She held it out to Abigail. It's yours, child. It always was. Abigail's fingers wouldn't work the knot. Nathaniel reached out steady and undid it for her without a word. Then he stepped back and let her lift the lid herself. Inside lay a few small things. A lock of pale hair tied with thread her mother's dead in childbirth. A worn daguerreotype, and beneath them folded square and yellowed a paper. Abigail unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a receipt. $200 paid in full to the Whitmore Bank dated the spring of 1811 marked paid and signed beneath by Charles Whitmore's own hand, and below that, in a second shakier script, the words, all debt clear. T. Carter, by his mark, with a wobbling X. That's his mark, Abigail breathed. That's my father's X. And that's... Her finger hovered over the banker's signature. That's Charles. That's Charles Whitmore, admitting in his own hand that the debt was paid. Nathaniel's voice had gone soft and dangerous. 6 years before he claims your father defaulted on $1,100 he never borrowed. He looked up and his eyes were bright and terrible. Abigail, do you understand what you're holding? This isn't a story anymore. This is proof. This is the thread that unravels him. But Abigail was no longer looking at the paper. She had turned the daguerreotype over in her hand, the small worn image of her father young, standing stiff for the camera, and on the back of it in a clerk's tidy copperplate that was nowhere near her father's clumsy hand, someone had written a single line. She read it twice, then a third time. The blood drained out of her face. Abigail. Nathaniel stepped toward her. What is it? What does it say? She turned the daguerreotype around so he could see. On the back in that careful copying hand were written 4 words and a name, witnessed and copied true, C. Whitmore. It's his writing, Abigail said, and her voice came out hollow. The same writing as the receipt. Charles Whitmore handled my father's papers himself. He didn't send a clerk. He came. He stood in our house. He looked at my father and at me. I was a girl. I remember a man in a black coat. I remember him patting my head. Her hand flew to her mouth. He knew me. He knew exactly whose daughter I was. The whole time he's been courting me, forcing me, he knew he'd robbed my father with his own hands. Nathaniel Reed had gone perfectly still. He didn't want you because you were convenient, he said slowly, understanding dawning cold and clear. He wanted you because you're the last Carter standing, the one loose end. He marries you, and he owns the one woman alive who might someday come asking what happened to her father's land. He wasn't acquiring a bride, Abigail whispered. He was burying a witness. And in the bright summer washyard with her dead father's hair in one hand and his stolen life in the other, Abigail Carter finally understood what kind of man had set his sights on her, and that the only thing standing between her and him was a Lord's son with a grudge and a tin box full of the truth. The receipt and the daguerreotype went back into the tin box, and the tin box went into the deep pocket of Eleanor Bennett's apron, where no man would dare reach. That was the old woman's idea. A banker will search a girl's room and a lord's saddlebags, she said grimly. He won't lay hands on a widow. Not yet. Let me carry the proof. I've nothing left to lose but my dignity, and I've been spending that down for years. Nathaniel didn't like it. Mrs. Bennett, if Whitmore even suspects, then he suspects an old woman of nothing more than being old. She patted the pocket. Now. You've got your thread, Mr. Reed. What do you mean to pull? That was the question, and Nathaniel chewed on it the whole ride home and for 3 days after. One forged receipt proved Whitmore a liar in a single case. But a single case could be explained away. A clerk's error, a misplaced ledger, the word of a dead illiterate farmer against a respected banker. To break a man like Charles Whitmore, you needed more than one wronged family. You needed a wall of them all, telling the same story at once, loud enough that no magistrate could pretend not to hear. So Nathaniel went riding. He went to the Holloways first, the family Eleanor had tried to save, now scratching out a living as tenant farmers on land they'd once owned. He sat at their table and listened. Same as you'd expect, the Holloway man said, turning his hat over in his hands. Paid our note. Came to redeem the deed. Whitmore showed us a second loan we never took. Said we'd signed. My wife can read Mr. Reed. She read every word that bank ever sent us, and I'll swear on the book we never signed that note. But the magistrate took Whitmore's word over ours. Took it in an afternoon. Didn't even ask to see the signature close. Magistrate Cole, Nathaniel said. Magistrate Cole. The man's mouth twisted. Who folks say holds a real fine note of his own at the Whitmore Bank, a note that never seems to come due. There it was, the first thread of something larger. Nathaniel rode to 4 more farms that week. The story repeated itself like a hymn. Everyone knew the words to a real debt paid, a false debt invented, a signature no one remembered making, a magistrate who looked the other way. By the 5th family, he didn't need to ask the questions anymore. He just sat and listened and watched grown men's hands shake with an anger they'd been swallowing for years. He came to Eleanor's house on the 7th day, dust on his coat, and he was not the easy joking man who'd danced Abigail through a ballroom. His face had gone hard as the road. 11 families, he told her, standing in the parlor, while Eleanor poured tea with hands that no longer trembled. 11 I've found. There's more. Cole's signed off on every one. He's not a crooked magistrate who looks away for free Abigail. He's a partner. Whitmore forges the paper, Cole rubber stamps the seizure, and they split the land between them. Then it's not one man, Abigail said slowly. It's a machine. It's a machine that's eaten half the small farms in this county. He set his jaw. And it'll keep eating till somebody jams it. 11 families willing to testify. Willing's a strong word. Nathaniel rubbed his eyes. Willing to talk to me at their own tables with the doors shut. Standing up in a courtroom against Whitmore and Cole, both. That's another thing. Cole holds notes on most of them. Whitmore holds the rest. A man'll tell the truth in his kitchen and swallow it whole in a courthouse. When speaking, it means his children go hungry. Then we give them something stronger than fear, Eleanor said. And what's stronger than fear, ma'am? The old woman set down the teapot. Proof that the fearless can win. You bring one case, Thomas Carter's case, with that receipt, and you win it clean in the open where everyone can see. Then the other 10 stop being afraid. Then they come. Fear's a damn Mr. Reed. You don't drain it. You crack it and let it break itself. Nathaniel looked at her with something close to awe. You should have been a general, Mrs. Bennet. I was a wife and a widow, she said. Same skills, less thanks. It was Abigail who said the hard thing. To bring Carter's case in the open, she said quietly, you'd have to take it to the law. And the law in this county is Magistrate Cole, who's bought and paid for. So who do we take it to? Who in Virginia is bigger than Whitmore and Cole together? Who's powerful enough that they can't be threatened, and rich enough that they can't be bought? The room went quiet, and Nathaniel Reed's face changed. There's one man, he said slowly. Who? My father. The words came out like they cost him something. Augustus Reed. He sits the county court above Cole. A circuit judge can call Cole's rulings into review. My father has done it before when it suited him. If I bring him a forged note and 11 families, he's got the power to reopen every one of those seizures. He could break Whitmore in a single session. Abigail's heart lifted and then caught because she saw the look on his face, and it was not the look of a man delivering good news. But you don't think he will, she said. I think... Nathaniel stopped, started again. I think my father is the most upright man I know about most things, and a coward about the rest. He'll do justice when justice is convenient, when it costs him nothing. He looked away. And I'm not sure this costs him nothing. What aren't you telling me? He didn't answer right away. He walked to the window and stood there, and Abigail watched a struggle move across his back like weather. When I started buying up these stories 4 years ago, he said finally, not turning around, I told myself I was doing it because it was right, and that was true. But there was another reason. A reason I didn't say out loud even to myself. He turned. His eyes had gone bleak. Some of the land Whitmore seized, some of those stolen farms, they didn't stay with Whitmore. He sold them on, cheap, quiet, to buyers who wanted good bottom land and didn't ask hard questions about how it came free. A cold dread crept up Abigail's spine. Nathaniel, she said, who bought them? He held her eyes. My father, he said. Augustus Reed bought 4 of those farms off Charles Whitmore. The north quarter of our valley, the best ground we've got. The ground I grew up thinking my grandfather cleared with his own hands. His voice cracked just slightly, and he forced it level. It was stolen. From the Holloways. From a family named Pruitt. From others. My father bought it knowing or not caring to know, which is the same sin wearing a cleaner coat. The silence that followed was total. That's why your father sent the Holloways away, Abigail said softly. When they came to him for help, he couldn't help them without admitting where his own land came from. He didn't send them away because it wasn't Reed business. Nathaniel's jaw worked. He sent them away because it was Reed business. The worst kind. Eleanor Bennet had gone very still in her chair. So this is the shape of it, she said. To bring justice to these 11 families, you'd have to take the truth to the one judge with power enough to deliver it, and that judge is your own father, who is himself a buyer of the stolen goods. Yes, ma'am. And to win, the old woman went on, relentless and clear. You'd have to put your own father's name in the dirt alongside Whitmore's. Expose that the great Reed Valley was built on the same theft you're trying to punish. You'd be testifying against your own blood, your own inheritance. Yes, Nathaniel said. Ma'am. Abigail crossed the room to him. She didn't think about it. She just went, and she took his hand the way she had at the ball. Only this time, she wasn't the one drowning. You don't have to do this, she said. I won't ask it of you. Burn your own father down to win my father justice. That's too much. That's more than anyone has a right to ask. Nathaniel looked at their joined hands. You didn't ask, he said. I'm offering. Nathaniel, listen to me. He turned to her, and his voice was rough with something that had been building in him for 4 long years. I have known where that land came from since I was 26 years old. I have ridden across it every day since. I have eaten food grown in stolen dirt and called it mine. And I have told myself it's done, it's old, there's no fixing it, leave it be. He shook his head slowly. Then a girl grabbed my hand at a party and turned out to be the daughter of one of the men we robbed. And I cannot leave it be anymore, Abigail. Not and still call myself a man. If I have to put my father in front of his own court, then God help me, that's the price, and I'll pay it. Abigail's eyes filled. You'd lose everything. The valley, the name. He'd disown you. Maybe. A faint, sad smile. A name doesn't mean much, ma'am, if I've got to be a coward to keep it. And in that moment, Abigail Carter understood that she had fallen without permission, and without intending to, for a man who was about to set fire to his own life, because it was the right thing to do. She did not get to say so, because at that moment there came a hard pounding at the front door, 3 blows, fast, urgent, and a boy's voice breathless calling through the wood. Mrs. Bennett, ma'am, you got to come. It's the bank. Mr. Whitmore's posted a notice on the courthouse board. He's calling your debt. He's calling it today. Eleanor Bennett rose from her chair, and for the first time the steel went out of her just for a heartbeat, and Abigail saw a frightened old woman underneath. Nathaniel was already moving for the door. He's making his play. He knows I've been out talking to families. He doesn't know what I've got, but he knows I'm circling, so he's striking first, taking the old woman's house out from under us before we can move. He can't, Abigail said. He gave me till the end of the month, he said. He lied, child, Eleanor said, recovering her spine. Lying is the only honest thing that man does. They came out onto the street, and the boy led them at a run toward the courthouse, and the whole town seemed to be drifting that way too, the way folks do when they smell another family's ruin and want to look at it. And there on the courthouse board, freshly nailed, was the notice Eleanor Bennett's house and lands to be seized in 3 days' time for non-payment of debt by order of the Whitmore Bank, witnessed and approved by the seal of Magistrate Josiah Cole. And standing beneath it, waiting hat in hand, and that smile arranged across his face, was Charles Whitmore himself. Mrs. Bennett. He inclined his head, gracious as a host. I'm so very sorry it's come to this. I did try to spare you. His eyes slid to Abigail, and the smile sharpened. There was a way after all, a simple one, but Miss Carter has been keeping unusual company, and I'm afraid a man's patience is not infinite. You forged that debt, Abigail said loud, before she could stop herself. The same as you forged my father's. The crowd murmured. Whitmore's smile didn't move, but something flickered behind his eyes, a flash of pure, cold calculation. Your father, he repeated softly. Now there's a name I haven't heard in some years. Poor Thomas. Couldn't read, couldn't pay, couldn't hold his land. A sad case. He stepped close to her, close enough that only she and Nathaniel could hear, and the mask dropped clean away. I had hoped to fold the Carter problem and the Bennett problem into one tidy marriage. You've made that impossible. So now I'll solve them the old way. The old woman loses her house in 3 days. And you? Miss Carter lose the only roof you've got unless you're at my door by then with your bags packed and your tongue still. Bring your unusual company into a courtroom, and I'll bury you both so deep that not even a reed can dig you out. He stepped back, tipped his hat to the crowd, and turned to go. But Nathaniel Reed's voice stopped him cold-pitched to carry clear across the gathered street. 3 days, Whitmore, Nathaniel called. You've given us 3 days. Whitmore turned wary. What of it? Nathaniel smiled, and it was not a kind smile. In 3 days, he said, the county circuit court sits, judge presiding. He let it hang in the summer air. I mean to bring a case before it. A case about forged notes and stolen farms, and an honest man named Thomas Carter who paid his debt in full and got robbed of his land anyway. I've got the receipt, Whitmore, signed in your own hand, and I've got 11 families who'll stand up the moment they see it can be done. The crowd had gone dead silent. Charles Whitmore's face, for the first time, lost its smile entirely. "You wouldn't dare bring that before Augustus Reed," he said. "You know what your father bought from me. You expose me, boy, you expose him. You'd hang your own father to save a dead farmer's name." And Nathaniel Reed looked at the man who'd robbed Abigail's family and robbed his own family's honor, and stood there smiling about it in the public square. And he answered loud enough for every soul in that town to hear. "Yes," he said, "I would. And in 3 days, Charles, that's exactly what I'm going to do." 3 days is not long to build a case. It is even shorter to tear one down, and Charles Whitmore had spent 20 years learning exactly how. The first family broke on the second morning. Nathaniel rode out to the Holloways at dawn to confirm they'd stand, and found the man already gone to the fields and the wife at the door with her arms crossed and her eyes red. "We can't, Mr. Reed. Mrs. Holloway. We can't." Her voice shook. "A man came by last night, one of Whitmore's. Said it'd be a shame if our note came due sudden. Said it'd be a worse shame if a barn caught fire with stock inside it." She wiped her face hard. "We got 4 children, Mr. Reed. I believe every word you've said. I believe it in my bones. But I will not bury a child to prove a point in a courtroom. God forgive me, I won't." By noon, 2 more families had sent word the same way. By dusk, a 4th. Nathaniel came back to Eleanor's house with the count falling apart in his hands. 11 down to 4. He told them, dropping into a chair, the dust and the defeat heavy on him. "Maybe 3 by morning. He's gotten to them. Threats debts called barns. He's faster than I am, and he's got more money than God." 4 families is still 4, Abigail said. 4 frightened families against a banker and a magistrate. He scrubbed his hands down his face. "Cole'll rattle them on the stand till they contradict themselves, and then it's just my word and a single receipt against the 2 most powerful men in the county." He looked up. "It's not enough. I came up short." "You came up human," Eleanor said sharply. "Stop pitying yourself. It doesn't suit you. We still have the receipt. We still have Carter's case clean and provable. One case won in the open. That was always the plan." "The plan assumed a fair judge." "The plan assumed you'd find your courage and your father would find his." The old woman fixed him. "You found yours. We'll see about his." But the real blow had not yet landed. It came the next morning, and it came in a coach, a fine black coach with the Reed crest on the door, and out of it stepped Augustus Reed himself. Abigail had never seen him up close. He was an old lion of a man, white-maned, broad, still in the shoulders despite his 60-odd years, with his son's dark eyes set in a harder face. He did not knock. He walked into Eleanor Bennett's parlor like a man inspecting property he was thinking of buying, and he looked at Abigail the way one looks at a stain on good cloth. "So," he said, "this is her." "Father." Nathaniel rose. "You shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have had to come here." Augustus did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. Abigail would learn that about him. The quieter he got, the more dangerous. "My son rides around the county for a week stirring up tenant farmers. My son stands in a public square and announces he means to drag a case before my court. My son threatens in front of half the town to hang his own father." Now he turned the full weight of those dark eyes on Nathaniel. "Did you imagine I wouldn't hear? Did you imagine any of it wouldn't get back to me by sundown? I imagined," Nathaniel said evenly, "that you'd do the right thing once you knew I knew." "The right thing." Augustus laughed short and without humor. "Boy, you don't know the first thing about right. You know how to feel righteous. There's a difference, and it's a difference that built the valley you grew up fat on. The valley we stole." The word landed like a slap. Even Augustus flinched at it. "You bought 4 farms off Charles Whitmore." Nathaniel pressed, stepping toward him. "The North Quarter, the Holloway ground, the Pruitt ground. You bought them knowing how he came by them, or not letting yourself ask which is worse, because you're not a stupid man, Father. You're a careful one, and a careful man who doesn't ask is a man who's already decided he doesn't want the answer." For a long moment, Augustus Reed said nothing, and then quietly he said the thing that changed everything. "I asked, he said. Nathaniel went still. What? I asked. The old man's jaw tightened. 11 years ago, when Whitmore offered me the North Quarter at half its worth, I asked him how a banker came to own 4 working farms all at once, and he told me, forged notes, illiterate men, a magistrate in his pocket. Augustus's voice did not waver. And I bought the land anyway, so don't stand there and tell me I didn't know, boy. I knew exactly what I was buying. I bought it with my eyes open because the ground was good and the price was fair, and I told myself somebody was going to buy it, so it might as well be a man who'd farm it right. The room had gone airless. You knew, Nathaniel breathed. All these years, you knew the whole of it. I knew. And you let those families rot as tenants on land you knew was theirs. I gave them work. For the first time, Augustus's voice rose, and the crack in it showed something underneath, something that might have been shame worn smooth by a decade of justifying. I let the Holloways stay on as tenants when Whitmore would have turned them out to starve. I told myself that was mercy. I told myself a great deal. He drew a breath, and the old iron came back. And I will tell you one thing more, and then we are done. If you bring this case before my court, if you expose Whitmore, you expose me. You expose the whole Reed Valley as built on theft. You ruin this family's name back 4 generations and forward 4 more. Your children will carry it. Their children will carry it. He stepped close to his son. I will not allow it, and I have the power to stop it. How? Nathaniel said. You can't keep me from filing the case. No. Augustus's eyes were flat and cold. But I can keep you from being a Reed when you do it. He let it land. Bring this case, and I'll strike you from the will. Every acre, every dollar. The house, the name gone. You'll walk into that courtroom not as my heir, but as a disinherited man with a grudge and a farmer's receipt. And a disinherited man's testimony is worth exactly what his enemies say it's worth. He straightened. Choose Nathaniel. The girl and her dead father's justice or your birthright. You cannot have both. I've made certain of it. The silence after was the worst Abigail had ever heard. She watched the man she'd come to love stand, caught between the only 2 things that had ever defined him, the family that had made him, and the justice that might unmake them all. She watched him open his mouth and close it, and she could not bear it. So she made the choice for him. She made it that night after Augustus had gone, after Nathaniel had sat by the cold hearth, not speaking for 2 hours after Eleanor had gone up to bed with the tin box still in her apron, and a look on her face like she already knew. Abigail packed a small bag. She wrote 2 letters. And in the gray before dawn, she came down the stairs and found Nathaniel still in the chair awake, watching the door as if he'd known. You're leaving, he said. Yes. Abigail, don't. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Let me say it before I lose the nerve. You are going to lose everything, Nathaniel. Your father, your land, your name. And you'll do it for me because you're too good a man not to, and I cannot live with that. I will not be the woman who burned down a man's whole life and called it love. That's not your choice to make. It is, though. She set one of the letters on the table beside him. I'm releasing you, from all of it. You don't owe me my father's justice. You don't owe me anything. You danced with a stranger at a party. That should have been the end of it. He stood. You think I can stop now? You think I can unknow what I know? Ride past the Holloway ground every morning and call it mine? I think, she said, and her voice finally broke, that I would rather you keep your whole life and lose me than lose your whole life keeping me. I think my father gave up his land to protect me, and I'll be damned if I let another good man give up his to do the same. I won't carry it, Nathaniel, the way he didn't want me to carry his. Tears ran freely now. Let me go, please. The way you held my hand when I asked. Let me go now that I'm asking the opposite. Where will you even go? Charleston. I have a cousin. I'll be a governess, a seamstress something. Far from Whitmore. Far from all of it. She picked up her bag. Win the case if you can. Win it for the Holloways, for the Pruitts, for the families with children to bury. But don't win it for me. And don't lose your father for me. I'm not worth a valley, Nathaniel. I'm just a girl who grabbed the wrong hand." "The right hand," he said hoarsely. "You grabbed the right hand." She went to the door. Her own hand shook on the latch. "Goodbye, Mr. Reed," she whispered. "Thank you for not letting go. Now I have to be the one who does." And Abigail Carter walked out into the dark, leaving behind the man who loved her, the proof that could have freed her father's name, and the only home she'd known certain with the whole of her grieving heart that she was saving him. She was wrong about that. She would not learn how wrong until it was nearly too late, because what she did not know, what she could not have known. Slipping out before dawn with her bag and her 2 letters was that Charles Whitmore had a man watching Eleanor Bennett's house, and that man had seen the girl leave. And by the time the sun was full up, Charles Whitmore knew that Abigail Carter had run, that the Reed boy was sitting alone and gutted with a case he might no longer have the heart to bring, and that the old woman who carried the only copy of that ruinous receipt was now entirely perfectly alone. The court would sit in 2 days, and Charles Whitmore intended to make very sure that when it did, there would be nothing left to bring before it. Eleanor Bennett was not asleep when they came for the box. An old woman who has spent 6 years owing money to Charles Whitmore does not sleep deeply, and she had heard the front gate's particular complaint enough times to know the difference between the wind and a man. She was sitting in her chair by the cold hearth, fully dressed, the tin box on her lap, when the 2 men eased open her parlor door. "Evening, gentlemen," she said. They froze. "You'll be wanting this." She lifted the box an inch. "Charles sent you. He wants the receipt, the one with his name on it." She set the box down on the side table, slow, deliberate. "Take it then. I'm an old woman, and I won't fight you for a tin box. But you tell Charles Whitmore something from me first. You tell him Eleanor Bennett said he's a fool." The larger of the 2 men hesitated. "Ma'am, a fool?" Her eyes glittered. Did he really believe I'd carry the only copy of the one paper that can hang him around in my apron for a week? Did he think I lived to 68 by being careless? She laughed dry as autumn leaves. "There are 3 more gentlemen, copied, true witnessed, and sworn before a notary in Richmond, who has never once borrowed a dime from the Whitmore Bank. One sits with a lawyer, one sits with a minister, and one I'll not tell you where. So take the box, take it to Charles, and watch his face when he opens it and understands that he is already too late." The men looked at each other. Then they took the box and ran, and Eleanor Bennett sat back in her chair and let herself finally shake. She had bluffed about the notary in Richmond. There were no 3 copies. There was the one receipt now in Whitmore's hands, and a daguerreotype with 4 damning words on its back that she had quietly slipped beneath her own mattress an hour before. But Charles did not know that, and a frightened man makes mistakes that a confident one never would. The trouble was, she could not be certain Nathaniel still had the heart to use any of it. That same night on the Charleston Road, 12 miles south, Abigail Carter sat in the back of a freight wagon and could not stop crying. The driver, a kindly old teamster named Mose, finally pulled up the team. "Miss," he said, turning around, "I've hauled cargo a long time. Sacks of flour don't weep. You want to tell me what I'm carrying back here, or you want me to mind my business?" "I'm running away," Abigail said. "From what? From the only good thing that ever happened to me, because staying would have ruined him." Mose chewed on that. "Let me ask you something, miss. This good thing. He know you think you're saving him. I left him a letter." "That ain't what I asked." The old man's eyes were shrewd in the lantern light. "Did he agree he needed saving? Or did you decide that for him, same as folks always decide things for other folks thinking it's a kindness?" Abigail opened her mouth, closed it. "'Cause it seems to me," Mose went on gentle, "that a man who'd give up everything for justice ain't a man who needs a woman to protect him from his own conscience. Seems to me he needs a woman to stand beside him while he pays the price." He clicked to the horses, but didn't move them. "You can go on to Charleston, miss. I'll take you. But you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you ran from the fight or saved him from it. And I've met a lot of folks at the end of their road. The ones who ran are always the saddest." For a long moment, Abigail sat in the dark and listened to the horses breathe. Then she said, "Turn the wagon around." The court sat at 10 o'clock on the third morning, and all the county came. They came because word had spread. The Reed boy meant to bring his own father's land into question, meant to call out Charles Whitmore in open court, and there had not been a spectacle like it in 20 years. The courthouse filled and then overflowed, men standing along the walls, women crowded at the windows from outside. Augustus Reed took the bench. His face was carved from stone. He did not look at his son. Charles Whitmore sat at his table with Magistrate Cole beside him as counsel, and he was smiling. Of course he was smiling. He had the receipt now burned to ash in his own grate before breakfast. He had watched the Carter girls' wagon leave on the Charleston road. He had 4 terrified families who would not meet his eye. He had, by his own reckoning, already won. Nathaniel Reed stood alone at the petitioner's table. No lawyer, no witnesses in sight. Just a man in a plain dark coat with his hands flat on the wood. "Mr. Reed," Augustus said, and his voice was terribly even, "you've petitioned this court to review certain land seizures executed by the Whitmore Bank under seal of Magistrate Cole. You understand that to proceed, you must present evidence of fraud. Real evidence, not rumor, not grievance." A pause that cut. "Do you have such evidence to present?" It was a father giving his son one last door out. Say no. Say you can't prove it. Walk away with your inheritance and your name. Nathaniel looked at him. "I do, Your Honor." A murmur ran through the room. "Then present it." Nathaniel reached into his coat, and Charles Whitmore's smile widened. Because Charles knew there was nothing to present, the receipt was ash. And Nathaniel drew out the daguerreotype. 11 years ago, he said, his voice carrying clear to the back wall. A man named Thomas Carter, who could not read, paid his debt to the Whitmore Bank in full. He was given a receipt. Charles Whitmore later destroyed that man's land claim using a second note. Thomas Carter never signed and could not have read. The receipt that proves this existed until yesterday. Mr. Whitmore had it stolen and burned this morning. He let that sit, watched Whitmore's smile falter. But Charles Whitmore is a careful man. So careful that 11 years ago, when he came in person to take Thomas Carter's farm, he wrote on the back of the Carter family's own daguerreotype in his own hand, a note confirming he had handled and copied the papers himself. He turned the daguerreotype over and read it aloud, slow, into the dead silent room. "Witnessed and copied true. C. Whitmore." He set it on the bench before his father. "That's his hand, Your Honor. Compare it to any document the bank has filed with this court. It places Charles Whitmore personally inside the home of a man whose land he later seized by forgery. It is proof he handled the original papers, the real ones, which means he knew the debt was paid before he claimed it wasn't." Nathaniel's voice never rose, but it filled every corner. And there are 11 families in this county with the same story. Forged second notes. Seizures rubber-stamped by Magistrate Cole, who holds a debt at the Whitmore Bank that has never in 9 years come due. Cole shot to his feet. "This is slander." "It's a ledger entry," Nathaniel said. "Yours. I've seen it." Whitmore stood too, and the smile was entirely gone now. "Your Honor. Your Honor. This is your own son, embarked on a reckless crusade that will, I remind you, expose your own purchases. The north quarter of your valley came to you through these very same transactions. You proceed against me, Augustus, and you proceed against yourself. You'll burn your own house to spite mine." And there it was. The choice laid bare in open court in front of the whole county. Augustus Reed sat on the bench with his son's evidence in his hand, and his own guilt on the table beside it. The room held its breath. And it was then that the courthouse doors opened, and Abigail Carter walked in. She was dust to the knee from the road. She had not slept, and she walked straight up the center aisle past the staring crowd to stand beside Nathaniel at the petitioner's table. And she took his hand the way she had at the ball, the way she had in the wash yard, and she did not let go. "I'm Thomas Carter's daughter," she said loud and clear. "It was my father's land, my father's name, and I'll testify to every word of it." Nathaniel looked at her, and something in his ruined face came back to life. "You came back. I decided to stop deciding things for you," she whispered. "I'd rather lose a valley beside you than keep a whole life alone." Augustus Reed watched the two of them, and the whole county watched Augustus Reed. "Father," Nathaniel said quietly, "not for the room now, just for the old man on the bench. You taught me what a Reed was. You taught me a Reed paid his debts, kept his word, looked a man in the eye. Every honest thing I know, I learned from you." His voice thickened. "So I'm going to do the thing you taught me even though it costs us everything. And if that means I'm not your son anymore, then strike me from the will. Take the name. Take the valley. I'd rather be a landless man who told the truth than a Reed who buried it. A name means nothing, Father, if I lose the man who taught me what honor truly is." For a long moment, Augustus Reed did not move, and then the old lion did the bravest thing he had ever done. He set down the gavel. He stood up from the bench, and he spoke to the whole crowded room in a voice that did not shake. 11 years ago, Augustus said, Charles Whitmore offered me 4 farms at half their worth and told me to my face how he had come by them, and I bought them anyway. A gasp went through the crowd. I knew. I have always known. I let myself believe that being a careful man and a quiet man made me an innocent one. My son has just shown me in open court the difference between feeling righteous and being right. I have felt righteous my whole life. Today I will try for once to be right." He turned to Cole. "Magistrate, you are removed from this bench and remanded pending investigation of your accounts." He turned to Whitmore. "Charles Whitmore, on the evidence of your own hand, you are bound over for trial on charges of forgery and fraud, and every seizure executed by your bank in this county is as of this moment suspended and subject to review." And then to the room. The north quarter of the Reed Valley was taken from the Holloway and Pruitt families by fraud. I am returning it, today, with back rent paid for every year they worked their own stolen ground as tenants. Charles Whitmore lunged for the door for escape. No one was ever sure, and 3 farmers who'd lost their land to him put him on the floor before he'd taken 2 steps and held him there while the bailiff came. The courthouse erupted. Eleanor Bennett, who had slipped in at the back with the daguerreotype secret, still hers alone, sat down hard on a bench and wept into her hands. Not from sorrow for the first time in 6 years, but from the unbearable relief of an old woman, watching a debt she never owed dissolve into nothing. It was not all neat after. Justice rarely is. The trials took the better part of a year. Whitmore fought and Cole fought, but a man's own handwriting is a hard thing to argue with. And once the first family saw the seizures suspended, the fear dam Eleanor had spoken of cracked and then broke entire. Not 11 families came forward. 31 did. Charles Whitmore went to the state penitentiary and did not come out. Augustus Reed kept his word. He returned the land, all of it, and the cost of it nearly broke the Reed fortune, and he never once complained. He and his son were a long time mending, but they mended. The morning Augustus signed the Holloway deed back over, he handed the pen to Nathaniel after and said gruff, "Your grandmother would have liked the girl. She had no use for fools or cowards either." It was the closest the old man came to a blessing, and Nathaniel took it as one. Abigail and Nathaniel married that autumn. It was a small wedding. There was no duke, no fortune on display, no fine coaches lined up the drive Nathaniel had insisted, and Abigail had laughed and agreed. It was held in the little white church the Reeds had built, and the pews were filled not with the county's gentry, but with farmers. The Holloways came. The Pruitts came. Mose the teamster came and cried louder than anyone. Eleanor Bennett gave the bride away walking slow and proud on a cane, 68 years old, and finally gloriously out of debt. And before the minister, Nathaniel Reed took the hand of the woman who'd once grabbed his out of pure desperation in a crowded ballroom, and he held it the way he'd held it that first night. "I've got you," he murmured just for her. "Same as the first time." "You can let go now," Abigail whispered, smiling through tears. "I won't run." "No, ma'am," he said. "I don't believe I will." In a county that had spent generations measuring a person's worth by the land they held, And the name they carried, a banker's forged signature, and a farmer's faithful daughter, had proven the only thing that ever truly counted. That character is the one inheritance no man can steal, no fortune can buy, and no name can outrank. And Abigail Carter, who'd once thought herself nobody, had carried more of it than every rich man in Virginia combined.